In this module, we examine the people who were here before the Europeans arrived to establish their colonies on the land of others. We explore the names of the early people, where they lived, and the public policies directed to them. The most common terms used have been Indian, the American Indian, or Native American. All of these terms are misleading and center Anglo-Europeans in history. There were people here long before the land was called America, and before colonizers mistakenly thought that they had landed in India. Native American appears to be the most accepted term today, but even it minimizes the pre-colonizing history of the diversity of peoples, customs, and languages, forcing all of them into a single body as a shorthand for describing the others. More accurate terms have emerged, including indigenous people, native peoples, original people. What is the right name to use? Well, it depends on to whom one is talking. If they are native people themselves, use the term that they prefer. This national atlas shows the numerous tribes and where they lived across the continent before colonization. Rather than refer to themselves as Indians or Native Americans, in the area now known as Virginia, they called themselves the Powhatan, Monacan, Nansemond, Nottoway, and other names based on their tribes, their history, and ancestry. Explore areas where you have lived. Do you know anything about the native peoples who once called those places home? Note the different languages. The map shows 18 different language stocks. From those 18 different groupings, estimates from work published at Indiana University are that there were about 250 different languages in what is now the U.S. As we saw on the previous slide, the languages are grouped into language stocks or families. The Indiana University map shown on this slide shows a consolidation into 9 language families, each with its own grammar and vocabulary. The languages were not written. As the native population dropped sharply after Europeans arrived, languages died too. Today there are 8 primary languages that survive: Navajo, Cree, Ojibwa, Cherokee, Dakota, Apache, and Blackfoot. Historical population figures are problematic. The population of the native peoples before Europeans is not known exactly, but there is a consensus that it declined sharply after Europeans arrived, first from disease and then the direct and indirect impacts of war. According to the Census Bureau, prior to 1900, few Indians were included in the federal census. Indians are not identified in the 1790 through 1840 censuses. In 1860, Indians living in the general population, but not on reservations, are identified for the first time. Beginning in the 1900 census, Indians were enumerated on reservations as well as in the general population. In the 2020 census, 3.7 million people identified themselves as American Indian and Native Alaskan, the terms used by the Census Bureau. This is about 1% of the U.S. population. Another 5.7 million identified as American Indian, Native Alaskan, and some other race. This brings the total population to 9.7 million, or just under 3% of the population. This map from the Census Bureau shows where Native peoples are concentrated in the U.S. today. In Virginia, there were over 180,000 Native peoples, with the concentration the highest in Charles County. As stated earlier, the term American Indian and even Native American are social constructions designed to categorize a diverse population of different people. On this slide, we see the 11 tribes recognized today by the Commonwealth of Virginia, 7 of which, shown in bold, are recognized by the federal government. The map also shows the numbers of the different members of these tribes in the counties wherein they reside. The difference between the 0.5% and the 2.1% of the population is the difference between those who identify themselves as Native American alone versus those who identify themselves as Native American and some other race. On the Census Bureau website, you can explore where Native peoples live today. You can do so by state and by the counties within the states. Explore the areas where you live and where you have lived. Compare it with the earlier map. What do you know about the Native peoples who call these places home today?